So I think from reading a few of the different assignments, I feel that just to go over kind of working backwards in the sense that you have your want, your desire, you have your need. What does the character need in his life to be better? And then you have, what will happen at the end? What life lesson does he have to learn? What self-revelation will he get into? Will he find out? So if you know those things in the beginning, you work backwards and it becomes easier. Your life becomes easier. Your story becomes easier. We're going to go into John Truby's 22 steps, which is a little more expanded. All the Dan Harmon steps are there in different forms, but this has more steps that includes plot also. And he also reiterates basically starting from knowing what the end will be and working backwards. That's really the best way. And then when you get to the take and find section, really making that two hard paths that your character has to decide. Those are some parts I feel like I felt like many people who wrote it kind of started off with like a cool idea, and they kind of like started to go from the beginning into a path that they thought organically flowed, which is cool. If you're good, you can make anything organically flow, even if you know where you're arriving at. So actually more thinking of what you want your decisions to be at the end, what your moral dilemmas will be, and then working back front to those points will be easier for you to just make sure those beats are there. So cool. Okay. I'm gonna play interesting character. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just so you guys know your need and your want. We're gonna now go into John Truby's. Am I saying that? John Truby. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
So these 22 steps you have that I sent as a picture or whatever. These, remember, first to clarify, these are not 22 steps of the story, even though they do line up chronologically. These are 22 steps for you as the writer to start to get to know your story. All right, this is for you. It does become kind of chronological at one point. It does line up with how the story should go, but more it's about you figuring out, for example, the self-revelation, the first one, self-revelation, need and desire, you're not gonna have self-revelation in the first scene. That happens actually towards the end, number 20, is self-revelation. But he's saying, again, reiterating, you need to know what your self-revelation is in the beginning, what your need and your desire. Need and desire is need and want. He calls it desire, want. You have to know that in the beginning. Those are your three main starting points for your character.
So self-revelation is your transformation. Self-revelation is your transformation.
Yeah. Self-revelation is the beginning, the beginning of the transformation. You realizing I need to transform, and then the moral decision that comes at 21 is you actively showing us that you've transformed. You have you're actionating that. So yes, it's the transformation part, which is at the very end, you see. And if you make that in the middle of the story, then you don't have anywhere to go to. So think about that. Okay, so I'm gonna go over these 22 steps real quick. We're gonna go over them again. You can refer to it more in depth later. And so, do you ever
Should we be looking at the graph, or should we be looking at the article?
Look at the graph. Yeah.
Okay.
Just look at the graph. So it's broken into 4 categories: character, plot, story, world, argument. The main thing are the story, character, and plot. So character is about your internal growth of your character. Plot is more of the fun stuff, the meat, that isn't necessarily about character growth, but it's about the story moving along and your audience having a good time and being entertained. Story world is not necessarily about either one, but it's establishing the world that he or she will be traversing in. And moral argument, I feel does have to do with character and plot, but is more commenting on the theme of your film and different perspectives of the film of the theme. And again, so I just want to reiterate plot. You know, at the end of the day, we're making a story that should entertain. It should, you should, you know, the question is like constantly the audience should be like, and then what? And then what? You know, don't forget, this isn't like, you know, your personal vlog or like a poem that, you know, like this is like you are making a mass media format which should entertain a group of people. It doesn't have to be mass, but at least, you know, it should find a market, a niche market. And it should entertain. You know, let's remember that we're entertaining people. It shouldn't be too heady and too preachy. It should be fun. Also, that's where the plot comes in, and that's what we're going to go over today. How to the tools we can use to make your story fun and engaging to watch or read. You know, I remember my screenwriting teacher said, you know, this anecdote, like stories first came about like when hunting tribes would go out to like hunt, and at night they would start a fire, and if the fire went out, the animals would come and eat you. So somebody had to tell a story that would constantly captivate them, and if anyone fell asleep, they would kill that person. So like that's like how engaging you have to make them. Make sure like anyone starts to fall asleep, you have to like wake them up. And you're not going to wake them up through, you know, cheesy twists just because you have to. Make them important and meaningful. And that's what we're going to go through, how to do it so it's not contrived and just like, oh, and suddenly he's actually turns out to be your mother, you know, like it makes sense. Okay, so first step. Self-revelation, need, and desire. You figured that out. Ghost, number 2, ghost and story world. Ghost is basically the world before this movie begins. And it has to do with your character. Basically your backstory. You know, what happened to your character before this? Why are we starting the movie at this point? And story world has to do with what's happening right now in this world. Where are we? Are we in space? Is there a revolution happening? Are you during coronavirus time? Is it in the dinosaur period? If these are important to the story and theme, you might want to establish it in a meaningful way. Hopefully it could be done through your character, not like through words that come up in the beginning of the movie or through random other characters. It has to do with your character also. Again, ghost, as in backstory, shouldn't be expositional, meaning it shouldn't just be said. It should be something, you know, you write out, like this is the backstory of the character, and then see how it could slowly seep into the story meaningfully instead of coming out right. So ghost, and sometimes literally it's a ghost in a horror movie. Usually the main character is haunted by something that happened in her past, like her daughter died, and so this whole horror movie is having to deal with this trauma. It's usually a trauma. It's connected to your weakness or your need of the character. So that's the ghost, basically the backstory. And the ghost has to do with your character's backstory more than the world's backstory. So knowing what that is. Okay, number 3. Number 3 is weakness and need. It is, you know what the need is. Again, it's what the flaw of your character that he needs to fix. Weaknesses can be more than just the flaw. It could be a list of things that are holding your character back. And most likely they will fix this weakness in the course of this journey. Basically, the flaw. The need and the weakness are very connected. And also the weakness is important because when you now bring in your opponent usually attacks your character's weakness. If your character is unable to speak in public, your opponent forces your character to give a public speech, you know? So you want your opponent to be, and we're gonna get into opponent, which is a big factor, to be very connected, like a yin and yang. And they attack, you know, Superman's opponent is Lex Luthor, who actively uses kryptonite, the one weakness of Superman, to get to Superman. That's very literal, exact, direct. You can find other ways. You know, what we're going to go through is very direct ways, kind of formulaic ways to do stuff, Hollywood stuff. And then your job is to find the nuances of that, so it's more original and more subtle. And all that. Okay, so you have then the fourth step is inciting event, which is the go section from Dan Harmon's, a little bit before the go, but it's the call to action. It's the thing that gets your character moving out of the status quo, the normal part of his life. So the beginning part is usually the normal part of his life, the everyday, everything he's been doing every day, the same pattern. The status quo, and he's going to break out of the status quo somehow, and you have to find the way that's interesting. Does he or she feel compelled to go on the mission right away? You know, is a Mexican immigrant. I really want to get to America. Oh, here's suddenly a golden ticket. Oh, I'm off. You know, right away. Or is he a reluctant hero? He doesn't want to go. He's scared to leave his village. But he's forced to leave. The gangsters come and burn his village. He has to leave. He's forced. He's pushed into the venture. So you could figure out what way you want to push. Is it out of self, or is it external factor that pushes? But find an interesting way that speaks to the character.
I have a question.
Yep.
Like, do you have an opinion on if it's better to do it like sooner rather than later? Like, should it happen like as soon as possible? Like, you know, where I've seen things where the inciting incident happens in like scene 1, and like,
do you like
and that can be very exciting, huh?
Do you enjoy that movie that you saw where it happens in scene 1?
I mean, I was drawn in right away. It was a movie that I was like, I don't really want to watch this. And then I was like, oh my God, what happens next?
Oh.
You know?
Was it a compelling story arc? The character, did it feel rich, or was it more of an action kind of bombastic?
It was more of an action film. Yeah.
So action films do
difference is that.
Yeah. What the benefit of building up the beginning part, the pattern, the normal day of your character, is to establish the weakness and the need. Also, when you know what the character is like, just in a normal day, you know what when he changes, what that means. You know, he's changed. He used to be this, you know, now he's this at the end of the movie. You see the change. And when he comes back maybe to that town as a changed person, you really see the change because you took the time a little bit to establish his normal routine. You also start to care about the character in the beginning. If you see them, it's just kind of normal, these weakness, flaws. And then you establish that, then you can start to use it in the thing. So to me, it's like, if you can get the inciting incident as fast as possible, great. But do these other things too. Establish who that is. If you can do it all together in one scene in the beginning, that means you're an amazing, concise screenwriter. And that's great. Sure, they say the inciting incident happen in the first 10 pages. If you're writing a feature film of 100 pages, it should happen in the first 10 pages. But it's really up to you. But it should happen as soon as possible so you can get it moving. But you should also take a little time to develop who your character is in a normal day, normal routine of the character. So you can see the needs and desires in a normal setting. Cool. Okay. Good question though. Keep asking questions.
Thanks for
Or just me
answering.
talking.
Yes.
So number 5 is desire. It's again the want. What is the driving factor of your character? Your want can change. Your need will not change. What does the character need to become is the ultimate goal. Your desires can change, but I would say that you have your overarching desire to be relatively the same, or it can suddenly become a different movie. It's like, I want to go to America, but now I want to, start a clothing line. Okay, that's why. How is that connected? So you can have an overarching desire. I want to go to America, but you can have steps in there. I need to get to Mexico City first. I need to go meet this guy. I need to go there. So those are like mini desires that are gonna help you in your overarching desire. And again, remember, your desire and your need to come into conflict towards the end. If you make them kind of a little bit oppositional, or you have to make them, he needs to choose between what he wants and what he needs, hopefully. Or you could do it in a little different way. There's all kinds of movies that do it a little differently. And not all movies have all of these steps. They have at least 7 of the steps that are important here, which is basically similar to Dan Harmon's. But they do, a good film usually has most of these though, if not all of them. So you have your ally or your allies as step 6. So you have your ally or your allies. Why is it important to have other characters? What is the importance of other characters? Romana is gone? Okay. So what your other characters, including your opponent, including, not even allies, just other types of characters, is they usually are a kind of an ecosystem that derives from your theme. So if your theme is, let's say your character is, starts off as a womanizer. He's sleeping with all kinds of women. And he has to learn to, find true love, let's say. A lot of common rom-coms are like that. His ally should not be an exact duplicate of him. He should be kind of complementing him or balancing, or like it should be like some guy who's settled down, is married, has kids, and he's like, hey, you should have kids. And it's like, no, I don't want. He's kind of, your ally is a bouncing board for moral, for the moral theme of the story. Or maybe another ally is a super womanizer who's just sleeping, and is a very extreme version of it, or is an older guy who's done it all his life, and now he's very unhappy with, somehow complementing or supplementing, or has to do, is a different variation on the values. It's a different opinion. Again, why I made you do the network of different characters that derive from your theme, is also now who can be the ally. You've chosen your main character. Maybe, my immigrant, he wants to get to America, but his friend ends up becoming a drug dealer who also wants that, but is a very different aspect of that. A sidekick in superheroes isn't exactly the same as the superhero. It represents some kind of different aspect. And usually it's a bouncing board so that your characters can have conversations or situations where they're in kind of conflict, but also their morals are in conflict, their values are in conflict. So in this way, when you have conflict, your character is expressing his values. You see what his values are because they're being challenged by another character. And you have that later in Attack by Ally, number 13. But that's more of a stronger version of that. But in constantly, usually, there's a little bit of questioning You know, usually in a rom-com, who's guy's a womanizer. There's usually some guy who settled down. It's like, hey, dude, you should really like. There's usually that guy somewhere. You know, there's a reason for that. He's providing kind of a bouncing board for his values being expressed. But he's still his friend, and they end up friends. They may fall apart, but they'll come together usually. Okay. Now, again, important. Just as really, the most important other character in a film is your opponent or opponents. Again, it doesn't have to be the villain, or it doesn't have to be black and white Batman and Joker. Batman and Joker is the greatest kind of hero-opponent combination. It could be people that challenge him or her. In a mystery or detective story, it's usually the mystery that is the opponent. In this, it's not necessarily a singular person, and it's slightly a different format when the mystery becomes the opposition. These are there to create conflict, which is there to create entertainment. Again, we are entertaining, remember. So opponent, if you follow the opponent format, there's an actual person, or it could be also like a situation like a hurricane. But even if there's a hurricane, you want some kind of a person there also, because a person is, you'll see why. He's smarter. A person is smarter than a hurricane and can really challenge the other person, the hero's weaknesses. Again, you can do that through mystery also. And it doesn't have to be one opponent. It could be, usually actually a great format is the 4 opponent map. Your hero is in the one corner and you have 3 opponents that are all actually opposing each other. We'll get more into that later. Batman Begins, if you've seen, is a great example of multiple opponents kind of clashing. But having one strong core opponent can be helpful for you, in that opponent really, what makes a great opponent, and we're going to go into what makes a great character, is what makes a great opponent is an opponent that is equally balanced with the hero in terms of power, strength, or ability to challenge. So it's a good adversary. It's not someone the hero can easily squash, and it's not someone that can easily squash the hero. It's someone that they're constantly kind of at odds with each other. Usually the opponent wants the same thing as the hero. You know, if it's Lord of the Rings, you know, Frodo, you know, he has the ring. He wants to destroy the ring. Saruman wants the ring. You know, they're battling for this one thing that they both, you know, or in a lot of Marvel movies, they're like, there's some artifact that can destroy the world. The heroes have to get it. The villain wants to use it. So sometimes having the same desire, it could be something like winning, you know, the spelling bee, you know, so they both want the opponent, but they want to be different in their values and how their opinion of that thing. You know, one wants to use it for good, one wants to use it for bad. So usually they could have the same desire. They don't have to, but if you do, it automatically creates tension and conflict, because there's only one ring to rule them all. So if only one person could wear it. So that's automatically going to cause competition and conflict. Again, your opponent should also be able to attack your character's weakness. You know, if Batman is a lonely person, or Batman, or if a hero, you know, has family, that could be a type of weakness that's used, that the opponent uses sometimes, that connection to family. And also, so we're gonna go more into opponent. I think I covered that enough. Is there anything I missed in opponent? Detect weakness. Okay, so next we're gonna go into fake ally opponent. Basically, it seems someone seems to be an ally, but turns out to be an opponent to block that person, to use that person, betray that person. Those are interesting kind of story points that you could use. So number 9 is we're gonna get into now the fun stuff.
But the fake ally isn't necessarily the ally from before.
No. It's okay. No. The ally is ally, and there's also the opposite. Someone who seems to be an opponent and then turns out to be an ally.
Can the fake ally be part of the 4-tier opponent box?
Sure. Yeah. Definitely. If you go into the 4-tier, you don't have to do 4 tiers always, but if you want to make your story more complex and rich, it could be that way. You want to also have, again, reiterate escalation in everything, in the revelations that I'm about to talk about, or your opponents, so your kind of weak mini boss or mini foe in the beginning, and then your, the Einheit of the boss, the second in command, and then finally the boss, and their powers are stronger and greater. So an escalation should happen in your story in every aspect. And that's something that sounds easy to do, but takes practice to get into, to make it. Again, I'm teaching you the kind of Hollywood format, making an entertaining story. Okay, escalation.
Sorry, another question.
Yeah.
What betrayal by someone you thought was an ally, or a surprise by someone you thought was an enemy?
And number 8 is just fake ally. So basically, fake ally opponent that turns out to be an ally that turns out to be an opponent. So the other way around is not step 8. It's just another thing that you could have. You don't need it. You don't even need fake ally, but it's a toolkit you could use to make something interesting happen. So number 9 is we're going to get into revelations. And this thing counts a lot of revelations. And you could have more revelations. You can have less revelations. But revelations, they sound like something hi-fi and highfalutin. But all it means is new information that your character learns that changes what he does. It could be like, I want to go to the store to get a cake. On the way there, I see the bridge has collapsed. That's a revelation. That's forcing me to make a decision, change my path, find a new path. And what you will, or the twist in the movie, that's the bigger revelation. Usually you want that at the end. Not every revelation has to be earth-shattering, like new twist that blows your mind. It's just something new information that changes the path of your hero. And what you do with that is you can create a revelation kind of map, as they say. You want to have 5 revelations in the film, let's say. And each revelation should get escalated. It should be more meaningful. You said, oh, the bridge collapsed. Okay, fine. I have to go. Oh, now the forest is on fire. I have to go through the forest. The forest is on fire. Oh, the forest on fire is created by a dragon. Like, all these new information should escalate. And also towards the end of the movie, if you have many revelations, they should happen faster and faster. So that really gets the pacing going, that gets the things going, that gets things moving, makes it exciting and compelling. Those are twists, you can call them, or you can just call them different information. And there's 3 types of revelations you can consider. Normal revelation, audience revelation, and self-revelation. So normal revelation is something we, the audience, and the hero learns together at the same time. Oh, the bridge is broken. Okay, let's go through the forest path. Audience revelation is something the audience learns. You'll see it in here somewhere. Audience revelation. Oh, number 16. But the hero doesn't know. So let's say hero sees that the forest is on fire, but we cut to a dragon is flying. We know that it's because of a dragon, but the hero doesn't know. And all that does is create tension or dread. We know something that the hero doesn't know. So framing your story is interesting. If this is all kind of like a magic trick and you're slowly unveiling things, the magic, you want to see how you're unveiling it, mysteries have a certain way that, kind of the thing is the question, like the question that drives the audience, to keep asking, what then? The question usually is connected to the need or the want. Will the hero get the girl? That's the question that you're kind of asking that keeps the audience engaged. Will the detective solve the mystery? Or who killed the victim? The mystery of who killed the victim. So that's something interesting in framing, is how much information do you give your audience? Do you give them too much, too little? If you give them too little, it's shrouded in mystery, but they're not getting it maybe. If you give them too much, they know everything, then they have no urge to find out more. That drive isn't there. But if you're smart about framing, you can find other ways to keep the drive going. And I always think about this awesome detective show from the 70s, actually, called Columbo. I don't know if you watch Columbo. Yeah, awesome. Like, the detective stuff has been around since Sherlock's time. So the idea of who did it, who done it, literally who done it, is very typical. You don't know who did it. Your detective has to figure out. The question is who. That's the big question, who. That keeps the detective driven and the audience driven. But in Columbo, it's totally framed differently in that you see who the victim is, you see who did it in the beginning and how they did it. And all that the rest of the show is about is how Columbo figures out and proves that they did it. So the question is how, or more than how, or how will Columbo prove it? And Columbo knows from the beginning too. He's a super genius. But it's about how he proves it. And so there's still a question the audience is asking. It's now, how is he going to prove it? I know who did it. That's not driving me to want to see this show. It's about how Columbo's going to prove it. So finding the framing of is important. Why in Revelation again? The question of, should your movie have a voiceover? Should it have a narration? That goes into framing. Detective stories have narration. Now with narration, you're giving a lot of information. So the mystery of what is inside the character's mind is kind of gone a little bit. So the framing has shifted. A good voiceover should be presenting information that's new and not in the frame itself, and providing another layer to. A great one is Mr. Robot. If you watch the TV show, he has a voice in his head. He's talking to the audience, and there's a dialogue. That's a different framing. It's very interesting. So think about your framing. How much? A lot of the time, in American Beauty, it starts off with like the narration, "I will be killed in a year." It's his dead ghost narrating the show, the movie. And the revelations are different when you change the framing. So think about that. So number 9 is, some new information and a new decision that he has to make. So you guys got that? Okay. Moving on to 10, the plan. So this is like when if someone is like, you got to write a feature film, it has to be 120 pages, 2 hours long, really long feature film. Usually we're 90, 80 to 100 is where you want to target. But let's say they're like, you have to make it 2 hours because it's got to, fill this slot. And you're like, shit, how do I make it engaging? How do I make it long enough and also interesting? A feature film, why a feature film needs this more than anything is that you're gonna have your audience sitting there for 2 hours, let's say. Like, if it's not fun and exciting, they're just gonna be bored. Like, 2 hours is a long time. Like, they have to be like engaged constantly. Half an hour you can get away with not doing a lot of this, but a movie's gotta have things. And these are again the toolkits. The plan is your character, makes a plan for what he wants, and this is also your plan in a way. I want to get to America. So now you list the steps of how do I do that? What is the steps of getting to America? Okay, I need to take a train here. I need to go to Mexico City. I need to talk to the drug dealer who's going to get me a fake passport. I need to then go through the border. I need to make sure that I find my family in Texas. So you list, like, these are the different things I have to do to get there. And you want to make this list of things, my plan, interesting and long and complex enough that it could hold for 2 hours. You have enough substance to work with. If it's just like, oh, I have to go to the corner store. If my want is just I have to go get milk at the corner store, that's like pretty easy to do. There isn't very many steps. It's not that complicated. Unless I suddenly make it complicated and the earth cracks open in the middle and I still have to go. How do I get there? And I have to go through all these like hoop-de-hoops to get there. So making your want be interesting enough that it has different steps to it. It's complex. It's not an easy task, your want. So it has to do, if the guy wants to win at a comedy show, let's say, he wants to be the best comedian. It's like you have to first do the preliminaries. You have to first, make an appearance on TV. You have to do a radio, and then you have to get the likes. Those different things that he has, and they should also escalate. They should get harder and harder and harder. So that's your plan. That's also connected to your drive at number 12. You're planning to do this, and sometimes your hero might not have the full plan. It should just be one step at a time, maybe. But there should be a general plan. And so also your plan is going to constantly shift. I remember a teacher said a great example is like, if a movie is about me having to get over this canyon, this hole, and that's the goal, to reach the other side, I first try a plane, the plane fails. I try, a zip line, the zip line fails. I try going down the mountain, and then I use a flying donkey to go to the top. And then when I get there, I realize that's not what I wanted to do all this time. I actually wanted to. But that's where the need comes in. It's like, oh, I actually really needed to be with my family or whatever. That's the kind of allegory, like you do all these steps and they should be harder and harder and escalating. But you realize that's not maybe what you needed to do. But you should always be trying to do it and then kind of failing at it. There needs to be like failure. Because if he just keeps going at it and there's nothing stopping him, that's easy. That doesn't show this task is really hard or the want is that hard to reach. And they're not creating friction. You want to create conflict and friction. And that's where we're going to come into the opponent again. The opponent's plan. So you have a plan, but your opponent also has a plan that is usually going to be against your plan. Is usually going to try to stop your plan. Okay, I want to go to the train station. Your opponent is, buys all the tickets of the train. Oh shit. My first revelation would be I realized that all the tickets, all the seat is gone. I have to now find I need to shift my plan a little bit. okay, I jump on top of the train. You know, that's now me, my counter plan to the plan. So it's kind of always finding an opponent that's constantly kind of attacking your plan, and making the counter plan, and seeing how that also keeps escalating. You know, you have your little minions in the beginning, and then you have your mid boss, and then your final boss. Or, you know, I just watched Milk, about gay rights activist Harvey Milk, and he ultimately wants to, you know, bring gay rights to at least California or San Francisco. But he starts off with just, you know, he just starts talking in the streets, and then he decides he wants to win the election, but he fails. And then he does, but when he gets there, it's not just winning the election. He needs to get this bill passed, but then there's this bigger thing in all of California that's about to pass, and it's about that, and then he's the opposite. So it's about, you know, his plan escalating, and then there's these opponents that are always trying to stop him, you know, super Christian lady trying to stop his bill, and it's always escalating. It doesn't stop. Like, even though it's not this like quest, I always kind of refer to a quest. It's built just like a Hollywood film. It doesn't feel like it because it's about, you know, such a not Hollywood theme. But it's constantly like the second he wins something, there's another thing he has to do, and he's already failing at that, and he has to find a new way to problem solve it, using what he's learning along the way. Also, why the drive, and the drive is him activating the plan, basically him doing it. And I think that he puts drive in plot and not character, but I would say that drive can also be in character, in that as he's doing these things, he's learning his self-revelation. He's learning the lesson that he's going to ultimately have to use later on. You know, if it's about him learning confidence, like in Onward, like he needs to learn confidence. So his little missions, that his plan, his drive throughout is like little lessons that he learns confidence. He may fail at it, but he's getting better at it. He's working that muscle. So think about your drive and your plan, how it works thematically with the theme, and how it works with what he's supposed to learn. It's not just random things. They have to do with your character's growth still. If you can make it about that, that would be interesting. And more thematic, more connected and unified. So you have your drive. So number 13 is attack by ally. That's again where usually your characters become so driven for their desire. This is the point where they become really far away from their need, actually, at some point. So if they have to be selfless, they actually become so selfish at one point, even more selfish than before. And then they have to go the other, that they become almost immoral. And an ally comes and usually says, like, dude, what are you doing? You're so obsessed with this thing. You're totally forgetting why you were doing it in the beginning, you know, or why you have to, you know, you're so obsessed. You know, some friend, Mexican immigrant, he's ready to go to America. He's a nice guy, but he just like has to kill a guy now. Like, what? And the friend's like, you can't kill a guy. And it's again creating that conflict of why it's an moral argument all the way over here is it's pushing that moral argument. If there wasn't someone to comment on it, we might not ever realize it's a moral argument, that killing this guy is bad to him. He's just so driven, he's maybe forgot it. Someone needs to come and remind him that that's really not the person you are. You need to become this, who ultimately become the hero. You're not this immoral person. So you have to kind of have him question, skirt the boundaries of morality throughout this whole thing, you know, darkness and goodness. That's why great characters, and we're going to go back after going through this a little bit, touch on what makes a great character. is that great characters work in the gray zone, in the shadows. They're not great always. They become great at the end, and they have to do some immoral things. And immoral can mean something simple as, you know, lying. Doesn't have to be killing necessarily, but something that's kind of not great. You know, something greedy, something selfish. These are immoral actions. So in your drive, your character kind of becomes immoral at some point too. Is learning the things, but is not practicing those things. You know, and that's where your ally can come in and kind of show like, this is what you're doing wrong. And you have 14 and 15, where you have apparent defeat. This is the point where let's see, where is it? This is basically where it looks like your opponent has lost. He's tried everything, and you've taken, again, it's always like, don't let his mission become too easy. He gets it, he loses it. He takes 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. He's still kind of making progress, and then you can have him crash all the way down, and almost seem like in Onward, you know, you think he's about to reach their goal, and it turns out, I don't know, I hope you've seen it, and it turns out it was in front of his school. It's like, what? And it's like, oh, this was all just a hoax. There was no thing all along. So apparent defeat, you really think he's defeated. He's lost hope almost. It's like almost near his end. And it could be that it doesn't have to be he's completely defeated yet. It's just apparent defeat. And I don't know if this defeat means the ultimate defeat, you know, where he seems like he's dead and he has to go to hell and come back, quote unquote, the rebirth. It could be some defeats. It could be multiple defeats also, a smaller defeat and a really big defeat. So there's that. You have then your 15 is your obsessive drive, or change desire motive. This is where your character's really this is really where your character, even though your ally told you that you're going down a wrong path, you usually don't listen to your ally. It's not your ally that changes your mind. It's really your self-revelation at the end that changes your mind. But the ally is there. Again, why it's a moral argument is there to restate the moral argument, more for the audience, more for the theme of the film. And you're so driven, you become so obsessed with this. You're doing anything to do what you want because you've been on this journey for so long. You kind of lose your morality, you lose your perspective, and you're like in America, and someone's like, you know, you have to kill someone, and you kind of do that. You kill someone even, and you realize, and you have more second revelation and decision. So you have a new piece of information, and it's like, hey, if you kill this guy, you get to go on the truck that goes to America, and he takes that decision. He does it. Maybe it's a bad guy. Maybe it's a gangster. So we can forgive him. Hero redemption. But it's like, oh shit, he's done this new information, and he's made a decision that's usually immoral. Usually your decisions are not great decisions, in that they're against your need. They're for your desire, but not for your need. Against your need. Here you can have an audience revelation. Maybe the guy he killed turns out to be a federal agent, a federale, or you know, oh shit. It just means it's not just a gangster. There's now the U.S. government is after him. Shit, he needs to do another third revelation. Now it's kind of like back to back. So that's like your revelations are now culminating and getting faster. More stuff's happening. Your visit to death. is basically, you know, in Homer, why it's called Visit to Death, it comes from your hero's journey, where Homer literally goes to hell at one point to see, because he learns in his revelation, he learns that his mother killed himself because of him being away for so long, and he goes to death. That makes him go to death, go to the literal opposite of where he wants to go, home. He goes to death because of something. So basically, this is the lowest point of your hero. We had apparent defeat, which is kind of like a liked version of that, maybe. But this is like the real ultimate defeat, really at your lowest point of your hero. And what you need, and you can have like visit to death, battle, self-revelation, moral, like these could happen. These are towards the end of the movie. They don't have to happen in that order. This is kind of just how it's listed. Different movies do it in a little bit different order. So your battle is your
of this visit to death. Could you give an example of this visit to death thing?
Sure.
You'd probably do it from Onward. Just to
Okay,
keep it
Onward.
consistent.
What do you think is the visit to death? What do you think his lowest point is, main character?
You asking me or? who you
Yeah, or
asking?
anyone could answer that.
Okay. I mean, the lowest point to me seemed like when they came out of and saw the school. But you mentioned that would be the apparent defeat, not the actual lowest point. So
Again, maybe
when he lost his staff, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that could be. I think actually for this Onward, I think probably the visit to death is more when he realizes he's in his school, is actually the visit to death. And apparent defeat is other defeats that he's had.
Like maybe when the police came and had them cornered.
Yeah, that's an apparent defeat. Yeah, that could be. And this death is the ultimate apparent defeat. In different films, in The Matrix, you know, Neo at some point, he's the agent at the end is killing him and hitting him, and he dies. He literally dies in that, and he then comes back out because he's reached super enlightenment, the rebirth. Sometimes your character literally dies, and somehow you have to bring him back. Not literally, but the most closest to death you can bring them, and literally have them. And it's like that inner hero energy is what keeps him alive. That little bit more to fight the bad guy at the end. So visit to death is that. Sometimes in the visit to death, where he gives up, it's kind of giving up hope. That's actually when the self-revelation happens in some places. In hell, he learns of this wisdom about himself that helps him to battle the enemy. So the battle that happens is showing before self-revelation. It could happen after. Because of the self-revelation, he's able to fight the opponent. It's again not set in stone, and these things can be done differently. But basically, it's your lowest point in the movie. You can. That's why it's called Gate, Gauntlet, Visit to Death. And you can read that in the article more, so if you want more in detail. But it's different things. In different movies, it's different things. But it just basically means kind of your lowest point. It could be in Onward where he's kind of like, I think visit like where the sun's going down and he knows he's lost. Basically, like there's only 30 minutes left. He's not going to see his dad. It's just the end of that could be the visit to death maybe.
If the visit to death includes self-realization, it could actually be when he's sitting with his dad and he's like going through the checkpoints and he realizes that it's his brother.
Yeah. That's definitely the self-revelation. That's one of my awesomest self-revelations I've seen. such a new original thing. You know, you think
And
that.
thanks for making me cry on it. Like.
Yeah, no, thanks Pixar for making everyone cry for every Pixar movie.
Seriously.
That's just great. Yeah. Even I felt stuff in my, it's just my heartstrings. So that's a great self-revelation. That's why starting in the beginning with self-revelation, I think Pixar writers, I'm sure, were like, okay, we have this thing. He wants his dad, but you know what he should really learn is that his brother was his dad all along. That's great. Yeah, cool. Let's work on that. Let's make this whole movie build to that. So that's how they worked on it. They came up with a great, they had their need and desire, and then they're like, what's a good revelation, self-revelation? And your self-revelation, think about how it's triggered. How does he learn this self-revelation? Is it, for him, it's his little list. So, you have to establish that obviously before. You have to have little crumbs of it sprinkled throughout the movie. It can't be something just spontaneously out of nowhere. It has to have always been there. And he's just decided through some reason to focus into this moment and realize that's why it is. I've had this moment once. This is gonna have me admitting some stuff though, but where I've had
Do
this
it.
crazy day where
You have us all on now.
Tender hooks.
So I had a day where I was in a birthday, a funeral, and a wedding on the same day. So it was Krishna's birthday in Purantaka. I went to see with some friends. Then I went to a friend's funeral in Panmundi. Not friend's dad's funeral. And then I had to go to my cousin's wedding. And at some point, and it was like the most, these are the moments where you just life is presenting you a lesson, this wisdom of nugget of wisdom hidden in the day. And at some point, my iPhone got stolen in the mosque of all places. I think we have to leave your stuff kind of like, and it got stolen there in the mosque. And there's this materialism at play, and I'm at my cousin's wedding and I should be happy. I'm trying to be happy for them, burst of happiness, but this materialistic Amit comes out always. It's like, oh, my phone, fuck, man, I had all my shit, and then at the end of the day, after all this, I had a drink or something, and the whole day became, I just sat and I triggered in my head. I was able to see the whole day instead of just my phone got stolen. I realized, holy shit, and I actually cried. I cried because I realized this day is crazy. This day happened to me. And there was other little things throughout the whole thing that felt like a movie. And I even tried to write the movie, but it's this doesn't, I don't even know how to write. Maybe one day, but that there was a self-revelation where I imbibed something and it made me see the whole day. And that's why I think there's some spirituality in expanding your mind a little bit sometimes to see the bigger picture. And that was my self-revelation. And you can draw from your own life, what makes you think deeply about yourself. Usually doing psychedelics is the obvious way, literally in the name. That's not what I said I did, but it makes you really look into yourself. But that's the obvious crux. You can't just have your character take some shrooms that, oh man, I'm I totally get it now. I'm selfless. But you have to find more clever ways that are more meaningful to a normal sober person to do it. And usually you can use symbols. You can use some other character that comes and triggers something inside. You can use different things. So watching movies and looking out for these things, you will start to see how different movies do it. And why is this important? That self-revelation is the most important thing of your story. That's really when everything comes together. When you saw Onward, he's like thinking about his brother, and it all clicks together. It all makes sense, and you feel that wholeness. You know what I'm saying? When a movie feels whole, that's the moment you felt it. Like, I saw this whole thing. It was funny and fun, but it was also meaningful. It all meant, those little things finally meant something greater. And that a great self-revelation can affect an audience. You probably saw your siblings differently after this movie. I've seen posts, my friends, like, I see my siblings differently because of this movie. And that good movies change, change people. They're lessons for the character and the audience. Okay, we kind of skipped over battle. But again, battle is basically where your hero and your opponent finally come head to head in a huge clash. That's very well balanced. It shouldn't be like one is more than the other. Make it as well balanced as possible. And then finally, your hero at this point defeats your opponent because of all the cool stuff. Oh, okay. Oh, so in, all right. Sorry, let me clarify. It's clarified in my head. Why this 18 says gauntlet is that in 18 and step 18 is that your hero gets that thing that's going to let him defeat the opponent. Gauntlet is that weapon. I think it's weapon, right? I don't even know what gauntlet is, but it's usually that.
Yeah, you throw down the gauntlet.
Yeah, right? What is a gauntlet though?
Hold on, I'm gonna look it up.
But I'm gonna say it's a weapon. It's a tool that you use to defeat your opponent. So it's the thing you didn't have, you finally get it, and you can defeat your opponent. That's not like super amazing, like, because it's like you just have this external thing that is given to you. If you make that harder to achieve that gauntlet, it's in Gauntlet, Onward, the gauntlet is literally that sword that he gets. So why I put death and self-revelation, I kind of mixed it up, is that in the hell and death part, it's not necessarily the thing he learns, but it's the thing, that physical thing he can get, or not physical thing, but something he gets to defeat the opponent, is what can happen in that step. So think about, he needs that extra little thing. He's almost there, but he needs that extra thing to really help him defeat the opponent. And that's what was missing in the plot section from him achieving what he, in defeating the opponent.
So these happen in the same place at his lowest point. He achieves the thing, that he finds the thing.
Yeah, it could happen if you want to make it dramatic. Yeah.
Is it important that they come together, or can they be two separate things?
They could be two separate things. They could totally be like, this is just the kind of general,
it's like and or kind of a situation.
And or it's a general guideline. See what feels good and compelling. These are usually tools to make the most compelling, dramatic choices. So it could be however you want, but you want it to be escalating. You want it to be higher stakes, and you want it to be meaningful. So you can see like what was missing, that he really needed. Finally some character comes and be like, hey, I remember you from the beginning of the movie. Oh, you want to get into this club? Here's the VIP pass, so you can go defeat the club owner who's your opponent. I don't know. It could be something like that. It's kind of a crux. It's not something super amazing as the self-revelation. It's kind of like, bank robber. Oh, all this time I wasn't able to, but finally, some guy comes that you thought betrayed you, comes to help you out. That little extra push to help you defeat. Oh, maybe it's friendship. Maybe your ally has to come. Oh, your ally has to come help you. So it could be something like that. That little thing that your hero from the external hero perspective was also missing. That tool, that shield, that really made him ultimate hero. in the hero perspective. And then in the internal perspective, that comes really in the self-revelation. The battle usually happens, again, it doesn't have to be a physical battle. It could be a battle of theme and morals, you know, where they finally come clashing, you know, where, you know, there's a great movie, Tootsie. Have you guys seen Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman? Oh, okay, that'll be an assignment. We can watch that.
Oh, great. I've been meaning to watch that for years.
Yeah, he dresses up like a woman to get a part in this movie, this female part. And he starts off as a kind of a womanizer, kind of like, you know, not objectifying women. And to learn to respect women, he has to become a woman. This is a great, just very neat thing. And his battle becomes about him, you know, saying his battle of words, you know, battle of morals. So it's not always like physical battle, but usually a conflict with what he's been up against. Then you have your self-revelation. So the thing he learns, right? So in Onward, he learns that his brother was, and then the moral decision. Okay, you can't just have him learn that he needs to do this. He needs to, again, what I said is activate it. Okay, the moral decision is the final exam. Remember, I was saying there was a midterm, there was a final exam. You know, midterms are little revelations and decisions throughout. Again, midterm doesn't mean it's in the middle, and there could be multiple exams. There's just this, and he usually fails morally. He usually morally has been failing all this time. And then finally, he makes the right moral decision because he's learned this self-revelation, which has been lessons he's been learning all throughout that culminates here. And you want to make that moral decision the most interesting, compelling. You know, the decision that in Onward, he lets his brother see the dad, you know? He could have easily they could have made the movie so they both see the dad, you know? But they create that obstacle. The dragon falls and he can't get to there. And he has to decide, like, you go, you know, I'll stay. Like, they create that setup that's plotting so that there is this moral decision that he needs. So we see him learning that I've already had a dad. I've had a dad all this time. You haven't had a dad. He's learned his lesson and he's applied that lesson. You want to see him apply the lesson, or I don't know if he's really learned it. Just because you say it and you see it in his expressions, you have to see it actionated. And once you've seen it actionated and it's fixed his need, the need that he's had all this time, you know, his need in Onward is be like your dad, or find you know, a role model like your dad. Is kind of his need. He has like a list of things he needs to be, but they're all overarching in like be like dad or something, the last thing he has. And he realized that you know, he does have a role model. It's his brother. He's fulfilled his need. He's become like his dad, which has become like his brother. His brother has taught him all these things, and he has become what he needs to be, and he's the hero finally at the end. And then you have the new equilibrium. Is usually you go back to the beginning, and because you took a little time to establish the beginning, you know, what he was before, you know, what you're saying, the inciting event, why you should, you know, they took Pixar, they always take a little bit of time in the beginning, and you can use a little bit of humor or a little bit of mystery to kind of keep that part interesting. But they took time. They showed him at school, like fumbling. He's failing his driver's lesson. He's his family set up, like him wanting to be, like all these little scenes. They took the time to develop there, so that when you go back to it at the end, you see how he's different. You see how he approaches things differently. He approaches friendship differently. He's more confident. He's willing to drive. You know, he's willing to do this and that, because you took the time to establish what he was before. Now you could see him different. and how he makes his world different, and people around him different. Do you guys get that? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions or anything?
This really is a great toolbox. I mean, there are so
Yeah.
many, because it's hard to get from, you know, one thing to the other. This gives you so many rich ways to to fill that space.
It really
Like-
is hard. And I might be saying it easily. And you guys know, that's why I'm pushing you guys to do the right thing, because you really got to write. And the writing is not easy. It's hard it's like easy to say it, but to come up with organic ways to do this and to make it natural and also original. Like, you want to constantly try to like be original, but these things are there as a toolkit to make the compelling, entertaining story. Instead of trying to be original, do that secondary. First, be compelling, entertaining is primary, and then be it. I'd rather you make a cliche story that is compelling story-wise than something experimental but is just like not compelling. Like, I'm not engaged. It's like there's a lot of gaps and weaknesses. Like, do this constantly, and then when you're like at your 20th script, you can start to break and be cliche, be original, and start doing stuff. But totally don't unapologetically be formulaic right now, so you can understand why it's important. And then when you start watching other movies and reading other scripts, you see how the experts do it in nuanced, subtle ways. And also do multiple things at once in concise ways, and how they do it faster and faster towards the end, and how they kind of they have their setup, their reminder, and their payoff. That's another thing. You want to have setups. You set up something, and then at some point you remind them of that thing, a symbol. And then you remind them of this, and then you have a payoff. Again, it comes, and every time it has different meaning. It escalates. That's ways to engage your audience and remind your audience. And your audience kind of feels when it pays off at the end, it's like a little treat, a little endorphin. And it has like, oh, look, it's that thing they said. Oh, I know that. I'm smart. I figured that out too. Like, it's kind of these little cheat codes to give your audience a good time. Again, we're trying to give us audience a good time. We're trying to give them a fun ride. 2 hours is a long time. And if like you're gonna engage them, you've seen some boring movies. Like I'm not gonna name that, but sometimes people who don't know this but get the chance to write and make anyways, they just kind of tell a story and you're like bored of it. I'm like, oh, what is like, I don't like, but they're not aware of these, or they think they don't need this and they want to just go into being original. But there's a reason why this works. I mean, this is the hero's journey basically, but told through John Truby. And it's an ancient theory. Like, it doesn't need to apply to movies. It can apply to anything. And if you really want even more, you can read I sent the PDF, read his book. You can do the worksheet. We're going to basically, for this course, we're going to go through the worksheets, and we're going to talk about it. This is a nice size class, actually. I don't mind if it stays this big. Then we could really engage, because at some point I'm going to run out of stuff to talk about, and it's going to be about applying it and talking about it. So I'm going to wrap up soon. What I just want to talk about is, so you're going to go, what the process will be is you're going to do this worksheet, these story development tools. So before you go into script writing, that's going to come later, because the more energy you put into the pre stuff, the planning, the easier your life will be, and the less rewriting you have to do. You do your rewriting or your editing in this phase, in your structural phase, in your planning phase. Instead of having to, you're going to do rewrites anyways, but less rewrites. So what you're going to do is you're going to do this worksheet, you're going to do the backstory and all this stuff, and then you're going to go into treatment phase where you're going to write each scene as a few sentences or a paragraph. You're going to work on that. We're going to develop that, and then make sure that's nice and good. And then you're going to go into writing the script, and then we can go into how to make interesting scenes and dialogues, and how within your scene itself there's changes happening, you know, character changes, emotional changes, things are happening. It's not just like, if I cut this scene, does it matter? It's usually one of these points, 22 points. If your scene isn't one of these 22 points, most likely it could be cut and nothing would happen. And it would save money budget-wise. Producer would love to do that. So, you know, how we're going to progress with that. But the more energy you put into this development phase, the less work you have to do, the easier your life becomes, because it's tough. Like, it's tough. I'm saying, like, this isn't easy. Like, you have to keep doing it. Like, you have to, like, if this is a Corona time, like, if, you know, everyone's kind of finding what they're going to do for 2-3 months. Like, you know, I'm going to learn the guitar. I'm going to learn. If, like, you could probably get decent at script writing in this time if you keep doing this, if that's the thing you want to work on in this. But if you're doing 5 things, then you might not be able to do this. I recommend that maybe you don't have the time to do this. So think about, you do have to write constantly. And it's going to suck at first. Like, oh, it's going to be shit. And you're like, what is this crap? I hate this. And you're just like pushing yourself to finish this thing. And then you go back and then you start to fix things and you start to rework things, and you're going to think about it. There's got to be a time where you just think, you don't even write anything. You just marinate in your head. Like, let it stew. You have your idea and let it kind of bubble in your head. You're kind of thinking about when you're showering, like what happens this. You kind of, when you're like going to sleep, maybe you're thinking about some stuff. You can make notes of it, but nothing is set in stone. Okay, so before I wrap up, because the next step is really going to be about your character, your main hero. So you know what journey he's going to go on. We're going to go back now a little bit into the character development. Now, we have your need and your desire, and your self-revelation. Those are the 3 like atomic particles that you need for your character. And
what's the difference between need and desire?
Need, remember want and need,
yeah.
I said?
Yeah.
Desire is just the same as want. He just calls it want in this. Desire, I call it want. It's the same thing. Need is internal. Want is the external thing that he wants. Self-revelation is when he realizes the thing that he needs to do, become whole. So that's the 3 elements that you must have in your character, some point or other. It can be subtly done. There are movies that do a great job. Even mystery movies, detective movies, they really emphasize more on the plot, a lot of them. But a good mystery is also about the detective going through a journey. And maybe it's not super as important, his need, you know, having to go back to his estranged son or something. You know, that's not throughout the whole movie, but like there's 1 or 2 moments you see it. And then at the end of the movie, he solved the mystery, and then he decides to go back, talk to he just calls his son, and that's just the end of the movie, let's say. And you just know that, okay, he's changed a little bit. He doesn't have to have a complete huge arc sometimes, but a little change to show he's become a better person is also enough, if the whole thing about this movie is more about the mystery solving of it. So how to make an interesting character is something that you should start off with, and look at what are interesting characters. I posted a video on the discussion. I'll send these again. I'm going to start sending you little videos, like tutorial or like review type videos that are great. It's like what I'm saying with visuals. Why I find them kind of annoying is it goes on for like 10 minutes, and there's a lot, they like put on their jokes and like a lot of intro. So it's like, I wish they would just cut the fat, go to this shit. But this video I send was how to make an interesting character. So you have 3 categories: likability, competence, and activity. That's how this guy decided to break down. Like you want your character to have, see these qualities. Doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to have all of these qualities up there. If he's very likable, very competent, very active, then he's Superman. And it's kind of like you've created a superhero already. There's nothing to grow into. But you don't want your character to be down here either, like not likable, not competent, not doing anything. He's basically just a stoner, like an a-hole stoner in his mom's like couch, not doing anything, not knowing anything, So those are the two extremes. You want your character to be a little mix of those, maybe in the middle of each, maybe a lot of one, but lacking the others. So, think about likability of your character. Think about, is the character interesting? Before I said creating sympathy for your character, John Truby says actually create empathy, don't create sympathy. In that you want your audience to be in their shoes, feel for them, but not feel bad for them. But I don't always agree with that. Sometimes like Joker, the movie worked so well because you felt, he becomes, in a sense, an anti-hero. That's an example of kind of changing into a immoral character. That's your anti-hero. That's still a character change, but turning evil. He starts, people like it, and people hold on to it because you create sympathy. He gets beat up in the very beginning, and you're like, oh, that's bad. He's just a nice dude. Why is he getting beat up? You're having sympathy. You're connecting to the audience. Relatability. I know me and Istiak are working on this comedy script. Istiak's a really funny comedian, Bangla comedian, and we're kind of going through it, and we're like, and he was saying things from his own life that he was bringing into the, so connectivity, relatability. Bring from your own life into your characters, like what makes them interesting and what makes them connected to your audience. Like if you don't build, that's why the beginning part is important before your inciting incident, is you're building that connection. Show them as a person, not just an action hero that's like boom, bam. Because if you just show an action hero, yeah, you're going to be driven throughout, but you're not going to care about like if he gets sent to jail or if he makes an immoral decision, you don't care because you don't know what he is in the beginning. You don't take that time to set up. So showing him, he could be very competent, very smart character. That's fun to see a competent character, but the other parts of him isn't working out. He's not likable. He's an asshole, kind of Sherlock Holmes. He's kind of likable in that he's interesting. Like I would have a beer with him for sure. But Sherlock in the TV show, he's kind of a narcissist or a mild sociopath. Like he's not likable really. But that's a different type of likable, kind of like. But he's super he's actually I would say, yeah, that's his weak point. He's not likable, but he's very competent. He's very competent, and he's very active also. Or maybe he's not as active actually. He has to become active. So think about what are some characters that you really like? Why do you like them? Think about that for a second. Try to avoid boring characters. It could be very easy to create cliche characters. If you're gonna go down a certain genre, let's say the science experiment genre, where you have your scientist who's figured out something, there's a lot of characters that have been that in main heroes, the scientist character. Think about what are some interesting versions of that. Think about ways to avoid cliches and tropes, things that have been done, and try to flip it and do something new and different, and kind of engage your audience, and maybe adding quirks, little character traits Think about, I like to think like when I make films or and I have my characters, I kind of assign people I know as those characters, or like two different people. I kind of like mix and match, and I'm kind of just stealing from it's like a like character vampire. I think of myself like I just kind of steal little maybe anecdotes or little incidences that happen to them, and I put it in the character. It makes it more real, and it makes it more original, makes it less cliche. So, and again, your need and your desire is the ultimate ingredients of who your character is. So coming up with interesting versions of that, even if you're in a very cliche realm, like he needs to learn to be more family oriented. How can we do that a little bit more originally? Like maybe the family self-revelation isn't your typical I'm a business guy and I need to learn to love my family. Maybe he learns to love an adopted kid, or maybe he learns to love a animal or a tree. I don't know, something new version of something done before. Cool. I think that's all for today.
What about active?
Active is how much is he wanting to do it? How active is he? Is he just sitting on his sofa? Like, I could be really smart scientist that knows everything about quantum physics. I could be a really nice guy, but I just don't have the drive. I just sit at home, smoke bongs, and I don't do anything. That is fine because my other aspects are high. So that actually is interesting. But
as a starting place.
Yeah. But if I'm just like not active, those are kind of the three ways. And you can watch that video. There's more examples of it, different. But you want your character to be somewhat driven. That's his active. Like, so active is very important. Actually, it's actually probably one of the most important here. Is your character driving the plot, the actions, or is the world events driving his actions? Is he a passive player? Is things happening to him or her, or is he or she actively engaging his world and doing stuff? That's something to think about. Sometimes actually we end up writing passive heroes, and you might not even realize it, but it's just like things are happening to him and he's reacting to it. He's just reactive. Think about how he actively goes and seeks out, I'm really poor. I want to actively go rob that bank. That's active. Oh, I'm really poor. Hey, your friend comes and says, hey, there's a bank job. You want to do it? Or he's just forced into it. So those are different variations of how active is he. Is he seeking it himself, or is things happening to him? And things can happen to him, that's fine. But just don't make it constantly, he's just a passive, he just kind of react. He should at some point actively engage his quest.
For the main character in Onward, if you were going to put these three things together, he's definitely likable. But he's not particularly capable, neither is he necessarily that active.
I would say that he's likable. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
You see him, he's likable. I say he's
because
not
the brother kind of fuels the active.
Yeah, like he's like, the brother keeps pushing him into things.
Yeah, yes. I would say his competence is very low. And I would say his active is not completely low. There is a drive.
He tries, but then he gives up, like 50%
he does
in.
want to. Like, you see that he has a little bit drive in him. He makes a list that shows that he does want to. He just fails at it. He does want to find out about his dad and stuff. Like, he is intrigued. He's kind of like inspired when he gets to staff, and he thinks for a bit that it's going to work. But it's more of his incompetence that's holding him back. And this growth is probably most about competence and somewhat about being active. And his brother is usually the activator in a lot of that. But then towards the middle to second half, he does become the actor of his own quest. And yes, you sometimes the activation happens later on, when he starts to really move into being a hero, kind of like taking on that role. But yeah, so there's different variations of it. But
like
he
his
does.
brother is like a variation. Like he has those qualities in different. Like he's not as competent, but he's super active, and he's like somewhat likable because you know he seems goofy,
Yeah.
but he also seems good. You know, like
Yeah.
there's so it's like there's like a
Yeah, his brother is like, kind of like really like at least like 60% of all of these things. He's very active. He is competent. He does know all of the stuff.
that's true. That's true.
He is kind of
He's
the friend who
surprises
knows
you.
the right path. But it's really about our main character believing in that path. That it's not just magic and like folklore. It's the real. There is magic in our world still, and being like his brother is the ideal goal. And the brother obviously has his own journey. You know, his journey, I believe, is he has to let go of his steed. I mean, his brother's journey is a little different. It's not as strong as, but he has a journey too. And when you start to have multiple characters, think about how your other characters have an arc also. What is their journey? Truby makes you do need, desire, you know, and then when you have your hero, you have to create a list of his weaknesses. What are her values, his or her values? What are, you know, what is their values, as in meaning their values connected to the theme of the film? And he has he do it for all the characters, so that you see how they're different, how they complement each other, how at some point they can make him bring out the other aspect of the hero. So yeah, so and having a growth of your other characters means your character has an arc. Your other characters are also complex, round characters. They're not flat characters. And you want to try to make as many round characters as possible in your movies, so they're not just flat things that are there to help your hero. You know, even the mom who's there having the B story kind of has a character growth, kind of like, you know, she starts off, you know, be the inner warrior, you know, that's like just a motto that she says in her yoga, but she actually becomes the inner warrior, which was always kind of there, but like showing it, and that's again a callback from the beginning of it. Yeah, so these are ways, and like really work in the beginning on creating your character, making a compelling, interesting character is the kind of the first step. And you're opposing other characters. Yeah, and then giving them weaknesses, your hero, which can be exploited by your opponent, and your weakness should be connected to the thing that you lack, the need. If you can make this ecosystem, this tapestry of connectivity, then you have a holistic film that feels whole and feels right, instead of being non sequitur tangent things that you go on that don't really make sense to the, like, you know, in Onward, he has little mini things he needs to do. He has a list of things that he needs to do, but they're all in the umbrella of being more like his dad or his role model, which ultimately learns is his brother. So they're all connected in a rich tapestry of things. You can have him have to need more than one thing, but there needs to be kind of an over-umbrelling thing that brings it together. Yeah, so that's it for today. Any questions, anything? Cool.
This video you mentioned, you're gonna send this to us?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Okay.
It's on the Facebook page as well.
Yeah.
Oh, it's on the Facebook page. Oh, okay.
The Facebook.
I was looking at.
I will. And this week I'm gonna send an email of just a lot of like few videos that are great. I've watched a lot. Some of them are crap. Some of them are just kind of like hate bait. I think I call it hate bait, which I kind of love to watch, like reviews about shitty movies. It kind of just makes me feel good about myself. Like, oh, look at this Hollywood movie that sucks. I'm better than them, you know, like just hate bait. So
Like Red Letter Media and stuff.
stuff like that, yeah. There's a lot of hate bait on the last Star Wars. Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
So I'll avoid those, but they do actually have compelling things that like avoid what to avoid and why this movie failed and why this movie is great. And a lot of these things I'm just saying, I'm teaching it, I'm saying it. And because I spent so many hours, blah, 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 I'm kind of just going to curate to you what you should watch. And if you're really serious about story writing or more script writing, I really suggest that you read scripts. There's a lot of scripts online, IMSDB, Internet Movie Script Database, or you can just Google blah, 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 script, PDF. Read great scripts that you like, and then watch the movie right after and see how it's implemented visually. Sometimes you could watch the movie with the script. If you have time, and if this is the focus you want to engage in for these few months, and it might be a few months, I don't know how it's going to go. Use it positively. I'm trying to read a script every day. It might be hard for some people, and I watch the movie, and it's fun to watch the movie and see. And then when you know all these things, you're seeing how they're doing it. Like, oh, that's the need. Oh, that's the. And when you see like movies that are really subtle, and you see, oh, they did it so subtly, but it's still there. That little point is still there in a different way. And you see kind of how they. So reading and then writing. It's hard. Writing is hard, even for me. Like it's hard to like get into it. But you can apply some tools to tricks and stuff to get yourself going.
So you're gonna give us a movie to watch for homework?
Give us some information about the scripts. You know how to get the scripts.
Yes, IMSDB, Internet Movie Scripts Database, IMSDB. I'll send you the links. Or you could just really Google the movie and script, and you'll probably find it.
Okay.
And watch out. Some scripts are in weird formats because they're the shooting script, so they're not friendly to read. So avoid that. Try to find like what looks like a normal script. And Rumana, you were saying movies to watch? Yes,
you're gonna send us homework, right? And we're gonna have a movie to watch this week?
I'll send one thing to watch.
Okay.
So it's not like a whole list. I don't know how much time you guys have, but at least one.
One is fine. My family is enjoying the movie assignment. We're watching them together.
Okay,
I watched Onward with my dad. That was cool.
Yeah. Okay.
That's sweet.
Yeah, I'm gonna send good movies. And then I'll start sending movies that aren't so directly hitting those points, and you could see how good movies are doing it differently. You know, and sometimes it's like Godfather. The first Godfather. You've all seen The Godfather, right? Right.
Yes.
Okay. It's okay if you haven't. You can admit if you haven't. I've only recently, also just 2 years ago, watched Godfather. I know.
So good, right?
Yeah. So it's so good. So Michael Corleone, he is basically an anti-hero in a little bit, in that he starts off moral, like he's just came from the military or something, Air Force, good, passionate, moralistic, and he gets into the family business, and at the end he becomes the Godfather. And the character change isn't so much there, but the writer, Coppola, I believe, wrote it.
Didn't he base it off a book?
Yeah, it's based on a book, but he made the character change happen in another character. His wife, seeing him, He closes the door on his wife at the end.
Mm.
And that's where he put the character. It's like, whoa, he's aware that we need these things. And maybe the book is different. Maybe the book doesn't have that aspect. But in a movie, we kind of need some of these. It's a little different in a movie.
But you're saying that's where he puts the recognition of the character change?
That's where he puts the character change, yeah. In that his...
like the announcement of the character change, like, kind of.
Yeah, in that the character is his wife, is the self-revelation or whatever, is more in what's happening than himself happening.
Right.
So there are some...
realizes what he's become.
Yeah, so there's
so
she puts it in, so that's a clever way to address this. Because, you know, when you adapt a book, you have to stay true to the book, but you still have to do these points somehow. So that's a clever way to approach it. And I watched a movie, The Gift, recently about a clairvoyant character. And it's a mystery. I'm not going to ruin it. It's a mystery she has to solve, and that's the driving force. It's not so much about the character change, but there is a little bit of character change. Just this one little scene they have to end that they could have easily thought of it after the fact. Like, they create the whole plot of the mystery, and they're like, wait, there's no character change here. Nothing. Let's just add this little scene in the middle to set it up, and then in the beginning, let's just add that, and it feels good. Like,
which movie? Which movie?
The Gift.
Is it the Kate Blanchett one?
Yeah.
The little girl. Oh, that's Gifted. No, that's Gifted. Yeah.
I think there's a few movies called
There's a couple different ones.
But it has Kate Blanchett as the main psychic. And that was interesting how they did that. So you'll start to kind of see how different movies do it differently. When you read scripts, you're actually really starting to focus. You're not distracted by the other stuff, the sound, the music, or the hot actor. It's just the words and the story and the dialogue. And you really can then start to, and you can read it again. You could stop for a moment and think about it. And so you have more time to engage these aspects when you read a script. Cool. That's it. For any more questions you got? I think.
I wanted some feedback on the assignment. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
Can we talk sometime later or something? Or
yeah, I gave a little email, but for you, I think, can you try to force yourself to push it into the Dan Harmon's story circle? So choose one of them. I know you did it.
I just want to choose. I want to choose. You know, I'm going on so many different directions. I just want to choose one of the stories. You know.
Yeah. And choose the one that speaks to you the most, that you feel compelled to.
That's why I wanted some feedback from you. You know, on which one's.
Okay. I'll look at it again and I'll give you. But ultimately, that choice has to be your choice.
Yeah. But I just wanted to bounce some ideas and just think about it a bit.
I'll give you that in the email. I'll tell you. Cool.
Can we talk sometime? You know.
Sure. Yeah, we could talk. Yeah. Maybe tomorrow. I just gotta out of energy now, but you can.
Yeah.
We can talk tomorrow.
I'm completely drained now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Really great.
Cool.
This is a lot. I've taken a lot of screenwriting classes and I'm learning so much.
I've taken 4 years of screenwriting classes.
Yeah, right.
And more years of writing, and writing is really the real lesson. I went to NYU, the greatest film school or writing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I found that I wish that my teachers just approached it like this more, because they kind of are they're great teachers. I love my teacher. I love them. If they're watching, thank you. And they're great screenwriters. They've written some great scripts, but maybe they're in New York and not in Hollywood, so they feel compelled to go off book a little bit, off the formula, and really approach it do it from your heart, do some original stuff, break the norm. So they didn't start off, they didn't build these things from the beginning, like need and want. They didn't drill it into me. I don't know why. I learned it from Truby's book, to be honest. So I just this is how I wish I was taught. script writing, and I'm just teaching it how I wish formula. I'm not afraid of the hero's journey. They never talked about it. They're allergic to the hero's journey.
They
Like,
never talked about the hero's journey. I mean, that was like
No.
first year in animation school. We
I
had
know, yeah,
hero's
no.
journey.
Yeah.
I approached it differently. There's different ways to approach it, as you can see. But they just we read Joseph Campbell's thing, and
We had to read Joseph Campbell.
yeah, we
first
read
year.
it, but we just didn't really talk about it because I think they just felt it was you knew it already, or like it's cliche or formulaic. I just didn't feel. I learned a lot though. I'm not saying the feedback is really more one-on-one stuff. They just didn't teach us this structure so much. Even in my TV writing classes, I don't know what we're doing in our class. We're just reading other people and taking feedbacks, but they weren't drilling into the character stuff, which I'm going to be constantly doing now with your writing. And the story,
awesome.
the story points and stuff.
Looking forward to it.
We're benefiting from your
From-
your trial and error, your trials.
I'm just curating. I'm not a lot of the stuff. I'm not claiming to know or come up with it. It's just John Truby's stuff. A lot of it is going to be my Bible, and then some stuff that I watch online. There's some great film theorists that are really smart, and they put out YouTube videos. I just find it's just too long and too much extra stuff sometimes. I just learned that you could fast forward YouTube videos and still
And send the link.
Yeah, you could do 2 times speed. I was like, what? That's half my life.
Oh.
But you can't do it to this video. You have to watch me.
You can also share a link from a certain point. So you can share a video to start at 8 minutes. That was an exciting thing I discovered.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it to just go into your head directly. It's I need to do it.
All right.
All right, that's it for today.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for watching.
Thanks.
Thanks a
Have a
lot,
good
Dimitri.
one.
Oh,
See you next week.
guys. Peace.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thanks.